Welcome back to The Last Word with me, Justice Malala. Widespread failures at voting stations across South Africa tonight and a pathetic voter turnout are our discussion points at this hour. My guest is Thembelani Mazibuko of the Electoral Institute for Sustainable Democracy in Africa. Thembelani, thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. It's late at night. It's been quite a day, but the biggest issue for us here on this show has been the IEC and the many reports we've received of various failures in technology, in voter registration, in delivery of ballot papers. What, in your view, does this mean for the credibility and integrity of this election and of the institution itself?
Thank you very much, Justice, for inviting me to your show. So I think it's important to realize that holding elections are at best a very complex and logistically challenging task. So there will always be issues, there will always be teething problems, there will always be unforeseen circumstances such as rain, traffic leading to late delivery of items. So our organization, we observed elections, we observed these elections, and we did come across some of those issues in some of the voting stations that we observed, especially today. So I think that context needs to be put there. Also, the voter management device, it was the very first time that it was being used in this election, and that did present some challenges in terms of how IEC officials responded to, say, voters who are not registered at that voting station, but are registered to vote within a metro. So there were different varying approaches in terms of what to do there. And because the law says you are allowed to vote on the PR ballot, but not on the ward ballot. However, our reports were that the VMD machine declined that voter to vote. So instead of saying you can issue one ballot, the PR ballot, they instead said that you cannot vote at this voting station, go to the voting station where you are registered to vote. However, in situations where they cannot go to the voting station where they are registered to vote, the voter does still have a right to vote for the PR ballot. So there are some teething issues with regards to the VMD in terms of what presiding officers should do in those particular situations, and hopefully in election cycles to come, the IEC will really iron out those issues.
Thembelani, I feel that you're saying, in a sense, that the IEC had a very complex task, as you put it, and therefore we must cut them some slack. But when, on the other hand, when I say to you, take a reporter like Rapule Tabane of the City Press, who waited 4 hours while the VMD wasn't working, and then you have Mr. Mashinini of the IEC saying, oh, you know, this can work even if they are offline, we don't know what the issues is. I sense a disjuncture between your very honest reply that, look, these are teething problems, and spin coming from the IEC that, oh, don't worry, that's not a problem at all. It was a problem. And then the other one was, of course, a couple arriving who had voted in 2016, 2019 together, and the partner being told, oh, you go to that voting station and you, the husband or the partner, can stay.
Yeah, no, there were those issues. We also encountered those issues at the voting stations that we observed today. And like I said, the IEC does have to iron that out. With regards to what you're saying, with what the chairperson of the IEC was saying, so the VMD can work when it's offline, and then when you come to a place that is online, then everything will then be uploaded. So it's not like that it stops working, because I specifically asked the question at the observer briefing. So I think that's what the chairperson of the IEC was referring to. And I think it's important to contextualize a lot of these things. It was their first time using the VMD machine, and I don't think that perhaps teething issues as well as issues with regards to and I think an issue that the IEC must take responsibility for is, I think there was lack of training. I think especially in the special voting, we saw some really basic things that should have been done right. Ballot booths facing to the crowd where people can see who people are voting for. So I think that the two main issues that we flag are training of presiding officers, as well as streamlining, troubleshooting potential problems, and having a streamlined response to those issues, as well as obviously ironing out issues with the VMD.
The IEC went into this election, I don't know if you saw the Afrobarometer survey about 6 weeks ago, which said only about 36% of South Africans trust the IEC a lot. That's a very low number. Despite that, it is one of the institutions in our country that has shown in the past 27 years. I want to ask you, given the attacks on the IEC by various politicians going into this election, whether this doesn't signal a deterioration of its standing in our society.
Yes, so the IEC, you correctly say, has been the subject of various attacks by some political parties. And I would go so far as say a lot of these attacks are unfair. They do stem from essentially for the Moseneke inquiry and the IEC going to court in order to have the election postponed and that relief not being granted. A lot of the attacks did start there, but I think it's important to realize why the IEC went to court, because the IEC is empowered to issue out a report on whether elections will be free and fair. So the IEC, in commissioning the Moseneke inquiry, was concerned that the election period, due to there being in a potential wave, might actually impede on free and fairness because of the curfews at the time. And the IEC losing was not good for its image. However, the IEC was following the recommendations of Deputy Chief Justice Moseneke. But it's also important to realize that the IEC has been taken to court twice subsequently, and they have won in those court cases. First of all, when the Democratic Alliance tried to the decision about reopening candidate nomination, the IEC was ruled to have made the correct decision, as well as Action SA, which I think was the more opportunistic attack, saying that we do not have an abbreviation. It's not the IEC's job to create abbreviations for political parties. If they don't fill in abbreviations, then the IEC is not mandated to create one. So I think there's been a confluence of events which have led to the IEC being attacked. But I think a lot of these attacks are unsubstantiated because the IEC was not acting in bad faith. Okay. And we've actually found the IEC to be quite transparent in the communications.
Thembelani Mazibuko, just very quickly, half a minute we have together. The integrity of this election and the credibility of the IEC, in your view today, can we go on and say those remain intact?
So a lot of these things are about perception. Of course, I can have my opinion, you can have your opinion, but at the end of the day, I think we must be critical in terms of the utterances we say in the media. Of course, political parties will say all sorts of things. The IEC does play in a very political space. So that's about the IEC. With regards to these elections, technically, they are binding. However, the low voter turnout is extremely concerning, and that speaks to the social and economic nature of this country, where many people are still living in squalor. They do not see their lives improving despite changes in political parties.
Absolutely. Thembelani Mazibuko, thanks so much. I really enjoyed that conversation. I look forward to engaging with you again. That's it for today. Tomorrow we will get the results, and we will analyze those at 11 p.m. With more of our guests. That's it for today. Have a fantastic evening.